I'm Abiti Sadlin, and I'm from ED2427A. I would like to share you some information about comics. So, the content of comics that I would like to share to you are history, genre, category, and also characteristic, comparison, plot, moral value, and also the video of the process. So, I hope you guys will enjoy my infographic video about comics. So, have fun!
What are comics? Comics are a medium through which writers express narratives or other ideas using a series of still images, usually combined with text. The key elements of comic books include panels, balloons, or we can call it as speech bubbles, text on lines, and also characters. Besides, cartooning and other forms of illustrations are the most common image-making means in comics. A comic book is a magazine that contains stories that have been told in picture or is an excerpt from a larger serialized narrative that is told via illustration. What are the history of comics? Comics have existed since the 19th century in the form of comic strips. Before comics were made in the form of books, comics were more featured in newspapers. Comic strips first appeared in newspapers in the late 19th century, with popular strips collected into book form, starting with the Yellow Kid in the US in 1895. Meanwhile, in Europe, The Adventures of Tintin began in 1928 as a two-page comic in the youth supplement of a Belgian newspaper. The late 1930s marked the arrival of the superhero genre, with comic magazines featuring Superman and Batman, as well as British children's comic The Dandy and Beano. The 1940s saw the release of Archie comics and the Peanuts comic strip. In post-war Japan, manga became popular, with Astro Boy first serialized in 1952. There are several genres that can be found in comics such as action, horror, comedy, humor, fantasy, romance, science fiction, and also sports. Let's jump on category of comics. There are several categories of comic books, but these are three of the most popular comic books in the world, such as American comic, Japanese comic, and Malaysian comic. American comic is a teen periodical originating in the United States, on average 32 pages. The comic format is read from left to right. Most of American comics are printed in fully color, and pop art has been used for American comic. Meanwhile, Japanese comic or manga is a comic that are usually completely black and white except the cover. The manga format is read from right to left. The term manga is used in Japan to refer to both comics and cartooning. Besides, Malaysian comic is basically a magazine that has pictures and subtitles simply without pages full of writing. There are several magazines that combine comics and writing in one issue, such as Ujang, Ana Muslim, Lawak Kampus, and so on. I'm going to share you some information about characteristics of these comics. In American comic, the artists usually draw buff male characters, usually for superheroes and villains, and curvy figures for female characters. either in heroine or villains. The artist applies semi-realistic on every character in comic. It focuses on heavy dialogue and it's really hard to understand the deep meaning behind the dialogue. Meanwhile, in Japanese comic or manga show detailed close-ups of faces more frequently. It more focused on the physical manifestations of emotion. The characters might even change shape in order to better express the current state of affairs. The large eyes allowed the artist to bring the emotions of the character to life. In Malaysian comic, there is no detail and still look cartoonish. Based on the someone famous or artist lifestyle, true story, or their childhood and develops the story into comic or creating random humor. The artist creates characters with different face shapes like round, square, and the figures are not simply realistic. There are several comparisons that can be found in this comic. In American comic, it mostly printed in fully color. Most American comics are popular with superhero elements. American comics are created predominantly for mostly teenagers. Art styles in American comics are more towards semi-realistic. In Japanese comic, it mostly printed in black and white, except the cover. It has several types of Japanese comics such as shonen, shoujo, seinen, josei, kodomokume, and so on. Japanese comics are designed for a far wider audience with suitable genre. Art styles in Japanese comics are based on the creator's art style. In Malaysian comic, it mostly printed either in fully color or black and white. Most Malaysian comics are humorous, somehow political, spontaneous, and based on lifestyles. Malaysian comics are basically created for children, and art style in Malaysian comics are more cartoonish. Plot is very important in making comics because the storyline will getting better and interesting and so on. So, in American comic, the plot is very complicated, it's very confusing because most American comics do a lot of crossover with other comics. It's really heavy and having a mature plot and storyline. The plot in Japanese comic is straightforward, but it ends with a cliffhanger, which is suspense ending, and the story will continue on the next chapter in Japanese comic or manga. In Malaysian comic, the plot is also straightforward, but it does not have continuous story or chapter. Based on true story, somehow spontaneous or random humor and joke. In comics, there are several moral values that can be found in these comics from American comic, Japanese comic, and Malaysian comic. Let's start with American comic. The moral value that can be found in American comics such as hope, protective, hard work, cooperate, and moral boost. Meanwhile, in Japanese comic, the moral value that can be found in the comic is such as friendship, hard work, never give up, and life lesson. In Malaysian comic, another moral value that can be found in Malaysian comics such as society, united, life lesson, and being respectful. Let's watch the video that I would like to show it to you, the process in making comic books.
enjoy with my infographic video. I hope you guys will read comics because comics is very good and you appreciate the artist, art style and so on. So, thank you for watching.